80 million Americans.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
The wicked ones obviously under heavy Masonic influence.
Contact me after I was on your last show, and he's like, "Oh wow, I've never heard of this before." It's like, really. And believe it or not, he was like I want to say the fourth or the fifth pastor who's contacted me over the course of like 6.5 years. That's it. So as far as where the church is on this, they're really not paying much attention or giving it much acknowledgement, because they really haven't tested it. Because you engage them, there's so much, the law has been done away with, and apart from the law being done away with, the mentality that it really didn't matter. And so you have this idea. Can you imagine like Moses coming down from the mountain and saying, "Hey, I got these really great plans for God's dwelling place, the divine the divine house. He's going to come and dwell in our midst in this thing." And they said, who cares? And Moses is like, "It's supposed to be made like this and like this and like this." And the people said, so there's some soft public response, just that it's kind of built into the indifference that, let me see here if I get this right. Nope, I got it mirrored here. That the broken shoebox has given people permission to not care about this, and it's established that as a norm. And basically it's the workings of an incompetent God. If you start looking at this, as being a house in His image, for His glory and so forth. So the public response there is really kind of crazy, in my opinion. It's not representative of the text. I mean, half the book of Exodus is talking about this thing in some capacity. So, it's just been a real surprise along the way to see the church respond as they have.
Well, you're right. I mean, there's so much that is devoted to as far as textual real estate in the Torah. Great detail. Right down to the tent pegs. Right. All this detail is put into this, but we've been shown this one model for so long that that's what everybody just thinks it is. I mean, it's everywhere you go. So, when people hear about what you're trying to tell them about this thing, do they view it as just theory or exegesis? I mean, is it how do they look at it?
Yeah, some people take it, as a matter of conviction. It's something that makes so much sense to them and it resonates. And the few people who've studied this, like, boy, I could never make sense of this and that, and like this suddenly clears everything up. I think that a lot of kind of the pew sitting bench warmer type are just sitting there and waiting for their super pastor teacher of sorts to give them either permission to acknowledge it as important or even relevant or correct. And so, the people who deal with it don't deal with it on a technical basis. They don't do it on a linguistic basis. They respond in emotion. It's the emotional side of because there's a certain amount of cognitive dissonance built into this thing. Because if this what I believe that I was taught in Sunday school is wrong, then holy cow, what else? So it's better just sweep it under the rug. We don't need to know about it because it happened. It's past tense, and that's that is the gravity of what I experienced. But getting into the exegetical side of it is really where the I'm in a state of disbelief that the academia, etc., Christian academia, Jewish academia, hasn't tested this claim more, and that's why I went to Israel actually to engage the Jews and see how they would respond. So.
Well, yeah, that's cool. So I mean, go right to the source there. When you're going to people who actually read and think and speak in Hebrew. I can imagine you're showing them, hey, look, this is what the Torah says. Show me I'm wrong, or am I right? What were their responses? I mean, when you took it right to the people.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. You have a couple of things going on there. One is a little bit of dependence on the rabbis, but the native speakers and the serious religious Jews seem to respond pretty well. Probably about I would say 80 to 90% was positive. A lot of it's overwhelming. I mean, this is going back to the drawing set that I sent you. So, I went to Israel 2016, basically armed with this set of drawings, which I sent you, which is available on my website.
Yeah.
It's just 5 pages. If you look at the commentary and art scroll, Jewish publications and everything like that, they go on for 50 pages, etc., and really don't get a lot of traction in what they're doing there. And so this it is a lot of information packed in a really small area, and this is why I take 200 pages on the book to explain it all, because there are that many relevant details that are not to be just hidden away or dealt with as if they're trivial. So when you go to the Jews, I mean, religious Jews, there's a good number of them that have parts of these Torah parshas just memorized. And so for me, it's really easy. I'm going with the here's my curtain drawing. So I'm like Tirei Yeshpo Yeriyot, Yeshpo Krasim, all these different these parts, and they're nodding, shaking their head like, okay, yeah, I know where you're going, I know where you're coming from. And so after you engage that, it's really it's like water off the duck's back. It's all downhill as far as presenting the idea to them. Now the weird thing is, on the flip side of that, you have again, no one has the courage to believe anything apart from the permission of the rabbi. And the other weird twist to this is, and I never really expected it to this degree, is that I think that Jews are inherently very pluralistic. Christianity splits into 101, not 101, 10,001 denominations over
40,000.
whether it's this in or on in one chapter and verse of the Bible. The Jews don't do that nearly as much, and so they have because they're so much minority status and they're so accustomed to being persecuted. I think that's driven them to a little bit more tolerance and acceptance as far as ideas. The rabbis say that there's 70 layers of interpretation in every verse, and looking at the Hebrew especially, it's like I tend to believe it. And in this arguably Greek Christian paradigm that we've all been Western culture that we've been raised in, our language shapes our thinking so much, and we start rolling into this either or mentality. Either it's this way or it's that way. And there's a lot of stuff in the Bible. There's overlapping parallel truths. And so once you start to really appreciate those overlapping parallel truths, you start to, there's just more and more space for common ground. You argue less and less. And this is what the original language allows that English inherently prohibits. And so when I'm presenting to them, they're just like, okay, well, I've been wrong before, and I've seen different dimensions of things, or I've changed my mind. I have the latitude to change my mind. And you start looking at the Talmud. It's all one guy says X, the other guy says Y. They make cases for their points, and I'm not saying they're it's all legit or illegit in there, but I'm saying that a few people realize that the New Testament, the Gospels, are a lot of that dialogue is anchored in Jewish internal disagreement between House of Hillel and Shammai, what have you. And these are things that are foreign to us because we're not familiar with that era of Jewish history. And so when they're asking him, teacher, is it like this or like that? And he's like, oh, you don't know this because so he's expounding it. Sometimes he's confirming what they're believing, and other times he's challenging and changing that narrative. But my point is that within Judaism there's so much kind of pluralism and depth and variation of thought. So they're not shocked by it, but again there's a sheepish side to them. Once I ended up talking to a guy who'd worked for the Temple Institute, and it was the most interesting experience. I bring him all this I basically spill out my drawing set on his floor, what have you, and I start explaining to him, with my choppy Hebrew what this is and what that is and what this is, and he's fluent in English, more fluent in English than I am in Hebrew, but his response was, if you're right on this, it's like, well, what have I been thinking? And you could kind of see there was almost like a look of terror, or a little bit of fear in his face, because it's I caught him to the point where he had to stop and reconsider everything that he had committed to memory and thought he understood. This guy I talked to, he actually had a model of the shoebox, the Tabernacle, and he said that when he brought it to bar mitzvahs, on windy days, it would blow over.
Yeah.
So, I'm not surprised. So that's one case in point in particular where someone who was heavily schooled, and it just like I just dropped a bowling ball on a stained glass or something, and it's like, well, I wasn't trying to do that. It wasn't an exchange of hostility, and that's what's really also very interesting with the Jews is they can have different opinions, and you can argue with them, and they don't take it personally so much. They don't get mad at you. I mean, that's kind of a generalization, but they're very pleasant to dialogue with because they're used to having question. Midrash is the word drash is the idea of inquiry. So from inquiry, we get these conversations, asking this question, asking that question. If you spend time with them on an Erev Shabbat, they're kicking all these questions around as part of their their evening. It's like this is part of what they do, and so they're so accustomed to asking the questions and stuff like that, where it doesn't take them that offensive. But I've been encouraged to start going on various rabbit trails then. So you're like, what was I going to say with the rabbit trails? Oh yeah, as far as like the kick the can down the road, like, oh well, this might be right, but I really don't know. I need permission to consent to this, and it's almost like the whole nation is traumatized in that regard. That they just cannot, they do not, want to challenge the authority of the orthodoxy, because it leaves them in a place of discomfort. So.
I was talking with Doug Hamp one time about the House of Midrash. People, you would go to have these discussions. He said it's not a quiet place. He said, there's like chest bumping, kind of people in your face, right in your face, and blah, and people getting passionate in discussion. He said, but afterwards, they'll go in there and have these passionate discussions and debates, and you think, man, these guys are going to come to blows with each other, but they don't. And then they go out and break bread together and have dinner and say, hey, that was good. We don't really have so much of that here. We have, you're a heretic, and then hit pieces come out after you. Unfortunately, we need to learn the Beit Midrash mentality, I think, here in the States.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you're talking to them, do you go with the approach of look, the Torah says don't add to it and don't subtract from it, and look at, this is what it says, but look at this model over here. See that pole right there? See that rope right there? That's not in the itemized list. I mean, are you able to do like hands-on point in discussion like that?
For the most part, yeah. I did pick up a hitchhiker who vehemently opposed me. It was funny. I was coming back from Shiloh, going to Jerusalem, and so you start talking to people. It's like, well, what are you doing here, and this and that. So he was an American. I mean, he was native as an American, a U.S. But he was like heavily schooled in Orthodoxy, and he had the explanation for every single thing that I had brought up, and there was just like no room for negotiation in his mind. You could just see it. It was, he was just dead set against anything like that. But he was really kind of the exception rather than the rule on that. When you do that, again, it's kind of going into a sacred place in their mind of like the Torah. Now, one thing that I was really surprised is, people talk about the Jews in the, when I say Talmudic Judaism, and I'm not saying that the Talmud has no influence on their on their religious observance and everything, but when I hear people speak ill of the Jews, I get pretty irate under the hood, because they just showed me so much hospitality when I was living there that I'll never forget it, and I will testify it till the day I die. And so this whole thing, they really do have the highest reverence for the scriptures written Torah. Where they get into this oral Torah, this is going to be more of a gray and soft area, where it gets a little bit more nebulous and hard to challenge them on, because some of these things, people, that's the benefit and the liability of oral Torah. You say, well, the oral Torah says that such and such. Well, did someone relay that right? I mean, you're assuming that there's been this perfect, unbroken, transmission of information, which, I have a hard time believing. But a lot of their oral Torah, I would really qualify it as, or describe it as really good, exegesis and midrash, as far as the thoughts, the ideas of what the text is trying to convey. So it's really it's kind of impressive, but when we hear the words, we just, coming out of being from within Christendom or coming out of Christendom, everyone just is like that's like nails on a chalkboard. It's like, don't say oral Torah, and and so that, again, I'm not trying to justify every which thing, but getting into these level of details, so few people have really pondered them on the technical merit of it. So few people have challenged the or have studied it. This comes up twice a year in their parshas, right? So this is how long? This is of the liturgical year. It's 125th. That's I want to say two. If you got 52 weeks a year ish, and sometimes you double up on parshas and everything, but it's first appearing in Exodus 20s, and then after that in the 30s. So it's a couple weeks apart and whatnot, and so it's like, can you think of any other part in the Torah that's like in a sense that redundant? So it's like, you really got to get this here, guys. That's kind of the impression. It's like Moses was told this, and this, and this, and this, and then the next batch of text where they're talking about this, and then he built it this way and this way, this way and that way, he or they, what have you. But this whole the duplication of that and the emphasis of that really isn't seen much to speak of, either in Christendom or in Judaism. And when I say in Judaism, I'm speaking more specifically now of Israel. And when I went tooling around Israel, I made a point to stop in like practically every single bookstore that I could possibly find. And my mission was to find Tabernacle works. I was going to find just a really detailed description, see it to the nth degree. And what I found was it seemed like there was 5 times more content, kind of about the temple in terms of kind of, generalities and maybe theories. And this kind of caught me off guard. And what I came to conclude from that experience of shopping in like every bookstore that I could, I mean, it's not like I would just stroll around the shelves and stuff like that. I mean, I would go directly to the owners, to the employees, and say, hey, what do you have here on the Tabernacle? And they find miscellaneous stuff. They, again, temple book here and there, but there were so few places that carried anything on the Tabernacle. And it's because they really don't study it, not to the extent that they do other things. I mean, you could find volumes of stuff, explaining how to keep in various states of kosher. They've got, if you take a look at the, the U for Orthodox Union, or, the other, the K Parve, the kosher stamps and symbols that you buy in your food in the American grocery stores. Well, imagine that and multiply it by 50 if you go shopping in Jerusalem, because, every neighborhood has got its own. I mean, it's not quite like this, but it's a lot of different, religious enclaves have got their own kosher certification, and unless, their rabbi has called out, certain products as being kosher, they're like, eh. I mean, it's kind of in extremes, and I think that's more in the Eastern European Jewish tradition, from what I recall and tell. I'm not positive of that, but there sure were a lot of different kosher symbols. This is my point. It's like, this is kosher, that's a different kosher. So it wasn't as cut and dried. So this goes back into this, like, you have diversity within some levels of unity, but there's some splitting of hairs that they differ on. But so that's an example of where they're doing all sorts of detailed distinctions on something. When I say petty, is kosher, kashrut. It's kosher is important, but there's other, dare I say, weightier measures of the law, and the Tabernacle is one of them. Of course, we have this 613 commandments notion. Why 613? If you start to count them, you'll see that there's, I want to say, 83 imperative verbs in the book of Exodus and Teruma. So Teruma is basically Exodus 25, which is talking about the Ark of the Covenant, the showbread, the menorah, going through that, through the tabernacle tent itself, through the courtyard. So it's Exodus 25 through 27, this whole string. It's 3 chapters. And from the 3 chapters, there are like I want to say 81 or 83. I think it's 83 imperative verbs. Talking about the tabernacle. Do this, do that, do this, do that, and they reduce it to one, saying, build me a sanctuary. That's it. And it's like if that's talk about a glaring omission of commandments. It's like, so how did Rashi come up with 613? It's like I can't stand behind that one. I mean, there's a lot of mystical stuff and traditions, and everyone then just will parrot 613, where if you do roll up your sleeves and start looking at that list, you'll start to see it's like, why isn't that there, and stuff like that. It's just the way that they parse and handle it. And I think it's because they're preferential to the temple. Think of the temple. The temple is the apex of Jewish life, Jewish history. Solomon, this is the glory that King David, King Solomon, the greatest of Israel's kings ever, of both the northern and southern tribes. They were greatest bar none in a lot of ways. This was where Israel was at its true apex. And I think that's the way they prefer to remember it. They don't prefer to think of themselves as nomads living in the desert. They don't even like to think of themselves as people going to a tent in Shiloh so much, because if you look at the math, I want to say it's in was it First Kings 7 or Second Chronicles 3 or whatever. It talks about Solomon commissioning the temple. It was 480 years after they came up out of Egypt that Solomon commissioned the temple. So if
hold
you
that
can
thought.
imagine that.
Hold that thought. We're going to break.
Extendivite, a 7-herb combination made from garlic, cayenne, hawthorn, bilberry, ginkgo biloba, valerian, and milk thistle. Extendivite feeds our body with the right nutrients to keep us healthy. Just listen to what Arthur has to say.
I was just calling to tell you what a great product you have. I had used this about 10 years ago after I had congestive heart failure. And it fixed me up and got me going for the last 10 years. Lately, I've been having heart trouble again, so I placed another order because this was the only thing that ever worked. And I just wanted to let you know that you have a great product.
To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822, or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
Your home has needs. It needs a healthy, dry environment all year round. Start by getting rid of the worst air in the basement and crawl space, where the problems begin and make the whole house sick. Introducing the new Smart Wave Ventilation Unit. It has advanced technologies to continuously reduce moisture, mold, and odors, and expel radon, gases, and pollutants. And now, Wave units include carbon monoxide detection to automatically expel air at a high rate and send you an alert. It also has an app so you can remotely monitor the conditions. Wave is a comprehensive, maintenance-free, affordable solution that will transform your entire home. Protect your home and family with what it needs. Give it a new Smart Wave Ventilation Unit. For more information, call 888-717-WAVE. That's 888-717-WAVE. Or go to dryhealthyhome.com. That's dryhealthyhome.com.
Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
For 5,000 years, the world was ruled with wooden ships by one man. 242 years ago, a small group of free men crafted a new nation built on liberty and freedom. Global elites have been fighting to destroy this new nation called America ever since. Based on actual events, Charm of Favor tells a true story of how they corrupted the election system. They infiltrated federal agencies and murdered witnesses, judges, and even presidents to keep from being caught. Now, the largest and wealthiest crime syndicate the world has ever known has been drawn out of the shadows. They have killed hundreds of Americans and recently attempted to assassinate half our congressmen. Still, they escape arrest through an almost supernatural charm of favor. Read Charm of Favor and be prepared to open your eyes to what may lie just around the corner. Charm of Favor is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and I'm talking with my guest, Andy Hoy. And Andy, I was just kind of scrolling through the chat room there during the break, and somebody early on had mentioned that they were part of one of your Zoom meetings a few weeks ago. They said it was very much worth the money. I would have paid even more for the information he shared. I highly recommend any future classes. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, and we'll get back to where you left off before the break. But you were doing classes? Are you doing some sort of online Zoom classes now?
Yeah, I did those a few weeks back. I kind of timed it according to the Teruma Parsha, and kind of going through the House of El Shaddai, the book, as well as having a couple other topics, content there. Let me think. So, the House of El Shaddai, it's a PowerPoint. I don't know if you got that in time. I sent in the mail this guy here.
Not yet.
Did you get that? You picked that up out of your post office box today, or no?
I actually didn't. I was doing my taxes today, so I didn't get to the post office box.
Yeah, I kind of threw that in kind of last night or last minute, and then I got workbook as well. So this workbook is kind of designed to. All right, there we go. The workbook is designed to kind of complement the book, the hardcover. It's also designed to work in a kind of a classroom type setting, because if we don't educate, this is the thing with this project. If I can't get people knowledgeable on it, where they can bear credible witness, people just shrug their shoulders, and they just take it as a fringe thing. But if you're armed with details and stuff like that, so. The workbook is 200, I think 200 questions in there, just basically trying to walk people through the exegesis in question form. So the questions are kind of guiding, and it's intended to be, how would I say, it doesn't have any illustration in it, and it's designed to try to help people overcome the English translation hurdles. So that when you hit these landmines that keep people from coming to understand it inherently includes the way out in the question. So once with a little bit of coaxing and guiding, to deal with a few of the translation things, that kind of overcomes that. So to go through the exegesis in an hour to hour and a half, I mean, that's pretty breakneck speed, unless you're, again, Jewish, and I can show all the Hebrew terms to a native speaker. But we're stuck with King James paradigms. I don't care if you're an NASB person or any other things that you think are a more scholarly work than King James. You'll have the same problems there, because they're all rooted with the same ideologies and the same theologies that are built into King James have, even though they don't translate them all like for like, they all remain there. It's the same imprint. So the first two sessions I was doing were dealing with this House of El Shaddai, just on this the teaching of the same content that's in that book, and I'm just expounding on it, in person, and I'm sure there's things I leave out, but there's other stuff that they bring a hold. Then let's see, I had I guess session 3. Session 3 I think I had was getting into the body, So there's a lot of anatomical parallels to the tabernacle. Some of it's just raw language that's built into the Hebrew itself. So when you look at Paleo Hebrew, 50% of all the Hebrew letters are anchored in human anatomy. Go figure. This whole idea of in the beginning, he's speaking everything to existence and speaking man into existence. And this being the holy language, again, half of those letters are anatomical, and you can see them bear out in different parts of the tabernacle, which is a really fascinating, funky side of it. And there's the Hebrew. There's one chart. I have to labor to bring that up and see if I can't bring that up during a break here. But they translate all these Hebrew words into the word side, S-I-D-E in English. It's like seven different terms that they translate into side, where it's like, well, the Hebrew there is actually thigh, and the Hebrew there is actually rib. And when you start seeing stuff like that, you're like, oh. And so the anatomy just really punches out. You have all sorts of similitude. It's a numeric similitude, functional similitude. There's the terms that are being used. It's to lip or to mouth the tabernacle curtains. It's using language like that, and it's for good reason. It's because it's making hints at our human anatomy, and we can start counting different parts and see how it matches the body parts. From the hands to the vertebrae and all that kind of stuff. There's some really amazing stuff there. Now, if you look at, I guess beyond that, so that's the body of El Shaddai is kind of that, work, that presentation content. Oh, let's see. I'm trying to think of where I went on from there. I did one on animal sacrifice, kind of rolling into Leviticus. I'm sorry. I guess before that, I did one on priestly garments, and so you cannot understand the priestly garments without the round tabernacle. And once you see that, I don't address this at all in my book, but this is something I discovered years ago, but just didn't have time to develop it. So I kind of forced myself to develop more content on that, on the topic of the priestly, what's called the breastplate, the choshen. It's really, to call it a breastplate is a little bit of a kind of a weak term, but so the breastplate or the ephod, all this stuff is what I'm focusing on in that presentation, and how it relates to the camp, how it relates to the tabernacle itself. There's just some really interesting parts in there. Then I go on to animal sacrifice, dealing with the utility side of it that people are just not familiar with. And, amongst Christians and Messianics, people are like, oh, it's terrible, that did you even bring up animal sacrifices, because now you're rejecting the work of Jesus and things like that. Well, you start looking at Hebrews, and it talks about, the physical, the sacrifices being of some value, getting into, being physically clean. And so I expound upon that, quite a bit, and look at it whole from a, with a twisted engineer's mind of mass flow, looking at, okay, how many animals do we have coming into this, and how many are going out, and how many pounds of waste do we make here, and what are we all throwing in the fire and whatnot. So I'm dealing with that quite a bit, and then I'm moving on to, let's see, I said the animal sacrifice. I guess the last one I did was on you getting into all this hidden stuff within Judaism that there's some interesting overlaps between Christian messianism and Jewish messianism. People ask when they're thinking about Jews, it's like, oh, are they messianic? And by that they usually mean, are they New Testament believers? And I say, when people ask if the Jews are messianic, it's like, well, I see all sorts of messianic Jews in Israel, but none of them believe in Jesus as you guys know it, or even Yeshua as Messianics would describe it. They run around with flags that say Mashiach, Messiah. with a crown. I mean, this is what they do, and it's mostly the Chabad types. So they're very much thinking of Messiah. Of course, they have different idea of who Messiah is and what, but you're getting into the esoteric sides of different Jewish focuses, studies. That's kind of where I go. If you look at, I guess I'll bring up one particular there. So you have this idea that Jews, in the book of Romans, it says that Jews are an oracle. At least that's what my NIV says, is from my recollection. That Jews are an oracle, and with that, the question is what are they representative of? Within Christendom and Messianism, there's acknowledgement that Jews, that there's these Passover allusions that are made, and it really is what brings the New Testament. This idea of the crucifixion, the Passover, and how all these things are linked. Without that, what kind of New Testament do you have? So there's halakhic stuff that, again, we're scarcely aware of. And I remember seeing some stuff from Mark Biltz many years ago, that he was talking on some of that, and it just blew my mind, talking about the Jews, the way that they use the Siddur, where they will be reading particular psalms in a again, Siddur stands for order, so it's a structured order. So most of us who've have some traditional Christian background, they're familiar with hymnals. We have these hymnals, and it's like, well, this is this order, and this, who put these things in this order and why? Do you ever stop and think about that? Well, the Jews argue that this goes back to temple times, and so this they're borrowing a lot from the temple service is the tradition. And so you look at what they were all doing in New Testament times is just what was Jewish tradition. Was there a prophetic significance to what they read? We don't see any reading schedule according to the book of Genesis or the book of Deuteronomy. At the conclusion, it doesn't say break it down this way and read them like that. So the Jews being an oracle, and I know you've seen that sometimes. How modern events they coincide with the Torah portions. It's just insane. Mm-hmm. Well, I shouldn't say it's insane. It's very inspirational in that it's very it's evidence of a divine footprint of some sort on this influence of human history it's corresponding with the reading of the Torah. These are amazing corollaries that they testify to this day. So all this stuff that is Jewish, all this Jewish tradition stuff, this is stuff that is kind of breezed over, and again, it's accepted at the Passover level, but it's not considered much beyond that. And one particular I was going to bring up, like Rashi's Torah scrolls, right? You have Rashi saying that a Torah scroll should be like 17 fingers tall, and so they used part of the finger as a measurement, it's like inches, and a certain column width, a certain width of the page, more or less. And the interesting thing about that is if you look at the aspect ratio, the dimensions of the width to the height, of what that makes for a standard Torah scroll. I looked that up just out of curiosity. When I say out of curiosity is because they have a ceremony in the fall called Simchat Torah, rejoicing in the Torah. And again, this goes back into this reading cycle that you have in within Judaism. Every year you start over in Genesis in the fall after the last feast. And you read from Genesis to Deuteronomy over the course of a whole year. Typically, there's triennial people too, but as far as the annual readings, it's 1 year for Genesis to Deuteronomy. So by the time they get back to Deuteronomy, it's the fall again. And what do they need to do? They need to re-roll the scrolls. But before they re-roll the scrolls, they got to unwind them. And so what they'll do is open them up and form a circle. And the circle that they have, they do this in the synagogues, and the width of this thing, it is the same between the width and the length. It's the same. It matches the tabernacle courtyard curtains.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Are you seriously? If you unroll do they have one scroll that has Genesis to Deuteronomy all in one scroll?
That's my understanding. Is that that requires, I was looking at the dimensions of Rashi's, from Wikipedia and other studious sources, but
so when they unroll the whole thing out in a big circle, it fits the same dimensions of what you came up with for the tabernacle?
It's the same proportion. So the height
proportion.
of the page versus the length of the whole scroll.
So
same
wow.
ratio.
Wow, that's pretty wild, man.
It's crazy.
Huh. There are a few questions in the chat rooms there. Well, I had a question too. When you were talking about the things related to Paleo Hebrew and the tabernacle, and as it pertains to the human body, are you familiar with Alfonso Munso's work?
I am. I've talked to Alfonso a couple times and had some really fun conversations. And I touched base with him a couple of weeks ago, because I don't know if he saw my name from. I think he saw my last interview with you, and he sent me an IM or something like that. And so he's working on all the meridians and things like that, and the frequencies, the Hebrew letters and the body. And so I was introduced to him through a mutual friend back in 2016 or something, or maybe in 2015. Talked to him briefly then, but then hadn't very much. And I know he's been doing more substantial research. He's got he's either an electrical engineer also, as well as a naturopath or something, and just amazing background for all this sort of stuff. So we've talked some, and with great joy on both sides, but we just don't do it enough, I would say. But
he's got some amazing. I met him. I was at the Take on the World conference a few years ago. By the way, that's something you should. I could put you in contact with Chris and Liz Bailey if you don't already have connection with them. That might be a great venue for you to speak. It's in August. I think it's the third week in August. So yeah, maybe when we get off the air, I can facilitate a text introduction for you. Because I think you would be a great addition for that conference, and historically he's been there, so it might be some really cool tag team operations that could happen there. I've been fascinated at every one of his presentations. I need to get him on the show. He's got some great stuff, but yeah, I mean, when you're talking about all that and the connection, there's probably something there. Put it that way. Especially when he gets into the meridians and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, between his biological knowledge, I think he's maybe a chiropractor or something. I forget. I think he's a chiropractor. But anyway, his understanding of biology and the anatomy, combined with your engineering experience and understanding of the tabernacle, boy, that's going to be for some interesting campfire discussions if you end up going to this. Because Take on the World, it's typically several days, but it's like a lodge campground kind of setting. So lots of opportunity for great teaching, but also after discussions around the campfire, kind of like Sukkot.
Those are the best types. I mean, that's where the best learning all takes place. That's but yeah, I would love to sit down and chat that, talking all the weird stuff, and those types of conversations, they just open so many doorways of thought. It's just mind bending, and I'm like an engineer and only an engineer, and I say that from the standpoint of human anatomy has never been a favorite of mine. But as I start digging into this, I have 16 pages of kind of written content that I drafted a few years ago, comparing the tabernacle to the human eye. So you can see,
sure.
right,
it just looks
right
like
behind
one.
me here, this thing, looking up into heaven.
Yeah.
This whole, in the phraseology, the apple of his eye. The apple of God's eye is the.
Well, yeah. I mean, because you kind of wonder where that figure of speech comes from, and that was one of the first things that popped into my head when I became convinced that your model was legit. I went through your website, and there's lots of stuff that intrigued me, but the main thing was don't add to and don't subtract from. And I had been to Israel in 2005, and I remember seeing tabernacle models, and I think it was 2015, probably just prior to you and I connecting. I went out to some kind of tabernacle experience type thing out in the desert of California.
Oh, yeah.
With a group out there, and it was remembering the things that I experienced in 2005 and in 2015, and looking at your model and looking at your drawings and looking at your claims, and you had a whole section on don't add to and don't subtract, and I was like, well, that pretty much sealed the deal for me. But then when I looked at the model, looked at how big it was, I mean, just logistically, so many things that now whenever we do tour portions that have anything to do with the tabernacle, priests sleeping there or eating there or all kinds of things happening. When I think about the number of people and the number of animals, and I look at the size of the box version, logistically, that's a nightmare. I can't even see how it would even be remotely possible. When I see a 6-story high dome tent, well, then that makes a lot more sense to me logistically for things like that. But also, if I imagine this pillar of fire coming down through the middle of the thing, and with the skins on it, this thing's lit up like a big glowing eyeball in the middle of the desert. I'm like, wow, if he's looking down, that is like the apple of his eye, right there in the desert.
Amen. I had yes, like I think I was saying, it's 16 pages of stuff, and it's like, and again, if I can only imagine if I get an ophthalmologist looking at some of this, having command on the subject matter. I had a list. I had developed a list, I want to say in 2015 of like, wish list of people who would join in on the project and help make content and contribute to research and stuff. And I actually have areas on my website where people are encouraged to upload articles, third-party stuff, third-party articles either written about the tabernacle or written where someone else does, whether it's somebody else's critique or someone else's technical contribution. It is a .org. It's not a .me. The idea is to have more than one person, doing a bunch of this stuff. But going back to this thing, it's like, well, if people are all ignorant of what it's shaped like, well, obviously we're not getting anywhere in a big hurry. It's like, if they say, oh, it's unimportant, and I don't care what your eschatology is, and that maybe you think that there's going to be a third temple. Maybe you think that the idea that the tabernacle is going to play a role in end times eschatology is something that usually don't kick around all that much. But for such a time as this, why is it that after all these centuries that this has been rediscovered now in our day and our time, if it's not to build, etc. So it poses there's lots and lots of questions there, and but anyway, I don't care about your eschatology. If you're like indifferent to eschatology, well, you have Christology. There's other parts of different body stuff. Was it? It starts with an O, osteo. It's like the bone guys, the bone doctors. Getting those people to start to see, how the structure's set up. I'm surprised I haven't been, bombarded with more medical people. But then again, I haven't, released a lot of content on the medical side. And again, this is where, until they start to say, the Peshat text is important. It's extremely important, and it's not just extremely important. It's so foundational that it goes back to this thing. You want to skip first and second, third, fourth grade, and like suddenly just say, well, I'm not ready to be a senior in high school. Why? Because I'm old. This is where people are theologically, where this is not seen as a key foundational knowledge piece. This is a pile of really condensed revelation, and I've been looking at it for years, and I don't profess to understand it all, because I'm sure that there's more that remains undiscovered than the stuff that I've rediscovered. And again, I say rediscovered, and you were talking before about this from an exegesis side. I don't see this as theory. People might want to dismiss this as just, well, that's just a hypothesis. It's untested, and because my favorite professor, my favorite pastor hasn't dealt with it, or my rabbi, let's not even pay attention to it. This is the mentality, and this is the problem. This is the hurdle that I'm trying to push. I mean, it's a big boulder, and I need public help on that to push this in a lot of different directions, from books on the marketing side, and all these different things, just project advocacy, like ask your pastor, hey, have you seen this content, or what have you. That's your rabbi, and engaging others at your studies and stuff like that, and educate yourself. I mean, if again, this idea that if you don't know anything, you just don't make a very good witness. You're not a compelling witness. You're not someone that you listen to. But you read the House of El Shaddai book, and it's like, I guarantee you will be 10 legs up on whatever your pastor knows about this structure, easy, or your, again, rabbi, or I don't want to direct it all towards Christendom, but they just don't know the content, because they tend to not be very mechanical, which is fine. I mean, everyone has different aptitudes and gifts, but again, do you call clergy when it's time to unplug your toilet, or do you call a plumber? It's a little bit of the having the right person for the right job, and it being so bold as to admit when something's outside of your area of expertise. And so they've just overlooked so much in the theology just because of missing this. This is so it's really a remarkable find, I think. And
yeah, well, that's a good point to hold on right now. We're about ready to go to break here, and when we come back, I want to talk about that a little bit, about the detail side of it. I mean, it is a mechanical structure, and it's all that detail's there for a reason.
Truth Frequency Radio is your #1 source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like Beyond the Veil with Chris and Cherie Geo,
X Squared with Brooks Agnew,
Paranormal Portal with Brent Thomas,
Jaronism Raw with Jaron and Missa,
Fearless with Frank Castle,
Strange World with Mark Sargent,
The Eye of Ra with Ra Castaldo,
The Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray,
Ironworks with Josh Corey,
The Kev Baker Show, and dozens more.
Did you know you can listen from any telephone by dialing 641-793-7117?
Or call into your favorite show, toll free at 833-TFR-LIVE.
Uncensored talk and news you won't hear in the mainstream media. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.
Another night of protests. I'm Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
Legislation to increase the number of justices who sit on the nation's highest court.
Senator Ed Markey and several Democratic House members say they'll be introducing a measure to bring on board more justices to the high court. That would let President Biden appoint more liberal justices and override the conservative majority the court has now. The president has said he's against packing the court, but he did issue an executive order a few days ago to create a commission to look at possible Supreme Court reforms. The Constitution doesn't dictate how many Supreme Court justices there should be.
Fox's Jill Nato. There's been another night of protests in suburban Minneapolis.
We've had the fireworks fired in the direction of law enforcement, the fireworks fired in the air, and you got the people up at the fence now, the projectiles that have gone over the fence, and you've got the sheriff's deputies tonight instead of the state troopers who are upholding the integrity of that fence.
The fence that surrounds the police department in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota, the city where 20-year-old Dante Wright was shot to death in a traffic stop on Sunday. Former police officer Kim Potter has been freed on bond after being arrested and charged with second-degree manslaughter in Wright's death. Firing her service revolver when she meant to tase him, a conviction could bring 10 years in prison. Cancel the Summer Olympics? It's a possibility. Japan's Kyoto News Service, quoting a senior ruling party official in Japan, is saying canceling the games, which were delayed from last year because of the coronavirus, is still an option. Near perfection in baseball.
To third. Moncada. Carlos Rodon has thrown a no-hitter.
The call courtesy of NBC Sports Chicago as Carlos Rodon of the White Sox blanks Cleveland 8-0. His bid for a perfect game ended with 1 out in the ninth when he hit a batter with a pitch. America is listening to Fox News.
You must unite what has been set aside.
We are TFR. Truth Frequency Radio.
Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and we are in the second hour of the broadcast. I'm talking with my guest, Andy Hoy. And Andy, right before the break, we were talking about, it's a mechanical issue, that this is, details are given for us in Scripture. I think a lot of times when we get to a portion of Scripture where it's giving us detailed information about something, whether it's the outfits that the priests are wearing, the breastplate, or the tabernacle instructions, or whatever. I think many of us just kind of blah blah blah. We go into Charlie Brown mode, right? We wah, 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 and we just kind of skim past it and then get to whatever the next part of the narrative is. But I've been finding, especially after 11 years of studying Torah now, that the details are there for a reason. It's all very important stuff there. And the thought occurred to me earlier when you're talking about Paleo Hebrew and biology and correlations to the tabernacle, and how there's so many different words for side. I mean, just English, we say side, but one of them was rib. And I was just looking at the structure, and I'm going, well, that would seem to fit. It's got these ribs, making the shape of the dome. And it's one of those things that just kind of popped in my head. It's like, that's kind of interesting. I want to segue into talking about models, because I know that that's something that's really big on your heart right now, and things that have been that you've accomplished recently. But I did want to ask you, do you have a 3D printer, like where you can do small models?
I do. I had the 3D printer. I got that probably a year and a half ago, and I was working on a 1/50th scale. Let's see. It was a 1/50th scale, which is around 50 inches on the desk. Or when I say the desk, it's more of like a kitchen table model than a desk, because a desk isn't that wide usually. And so the problem is, there's a number of problems. How do you express this in scale? In other words, the design of the tabernacle, it's made for just a ginormous tent. That's the official word. You can look it up.
Yeah.
It's made for a big tent. It's scaled up. The pieces, depending upon your cubit size, are anywhere between 15 and 20 foot long. Okay, so you're looking at beams that weigh 1 ton a piece, or if you follow the shoebox instructions, they could weigh more like 3 tons a piece, because they basically have to grow them wider in order to justify the length of their structure. Okay, which is just laughable, because I say it's Exodus between 26 15 16 neighborhood, where it talks about the beams being 10 by 1/2 by 1, or 10 by 1 by 1/2, and they say that's just 10 by 1.5, and there's not a third dimension given. Well, next time you build a 2-dimensional structure, you let me know about it. It's like,
yeah. The reason I was asking is I had created back when I was doing my models for biblical cosmology, I don't know if you can see my screen here, but I made this little guy right here. This was printed on I got this fairly inexpensive 3D printer. It's like, I don't know, $200, something like that. But I'm doing it in pieces. So you have the circle of the Earth right here. It's azimuthal, equidistant kind of thing inside a base that I could put water all around it if I wanted to, and I made a cutout for the dome on it like this. But making something that may not be all the dimensions and all the pieces may not be mechanically accurate, but for a homeschooler, that might want a model or something that they can show the kids and what have you. I was just wondering if you thought about making little things like this that you could even bring to conferences and stuff.
Yes. So I was starting to drift off there into other things on those details, but those planks in particular, you could model those out of 3D printed plastic, as a for example. Well, so I did buy a printer about a year and a half ago with the hopes, it's got like a, I don't know, 14-inch bed or something like that, so I can print something fairly large.
Nice.
But getting into like what is it the model will try to accomplish, and I basically decided that for to be of true value, you have to be able to model this up, kind of a part for part thing, because this is what it is. It's all about returning to the text. And so I've also been charged with paralysis by analysis or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is not. It's a character. It's a benefit and it's a liability too. So
yeah.
You start down rabbit trails like that, and it's like, oh, I have all these details. So I have a few boxes of printed, 3D printed parts, basically elbows to help the rib joints come together. Now, I decided against it, because it's something that's like cost prohibitive. And you go to my website, the products page, I've got like, $1,000 for a relatively small model. It's like, well, no one wants to pay that, and I also have it listed as not available, and I had that number just as kind of like a padding placeholder, and I'm trying to make that smaller. I guess getting into the size, I started doing, it was actually after one of your shows, and I was meaning to bring this up. So I think the first show that we did, it wasn't long after where a retired tool and die guy contacted me and says, yeah, I've made a model of Solomon's temple and Ezekiel's temple or whatever, and I'm wondering if you're interested, and I'm like, by all means, so he's a guy who works real fine, real small detail type stuff, and I'm thinking, well, we could get a nice suitcase model kit where I'm traveling to different shows showing the the detail there, and I worked with him for a while, and he was like, well, he obviously needed, because the drawings that I gave you, I call those exegesis drawings, and they're just basically Exodus engineering exegesis. They're Exodus, they're traditional biblical exegesis, expounding on the text, but it's doing it from an engineering perspective, accounting for the functions and so forth and the dimensions. Not in great technical detail that way, but linguistically, it's really intended to how would I say, confirm, or showcase the linguistics of it. And he was then asking me, well, how do they erect this thing? Because there's particular details in the design structure itself, which are instrumental to the erection process. So how on the top, the top of it weighs like 26,000 pounds or so. So how do you get that 60 feet in the air in the desert with no crane?
Yeah.
It's an engineering challenge, but it's not insurmountable. And so after he contacted me, he's like, first asking me for detailed part drawings, and so I spent many weeks making those up, and then I came up with an erection plan drawing after he was asking about that. And then he was swamped at work, working 55, 60 hours a week. They had him on like, double plus overtime type thing. And then suddenly out of the blue, several months later, they lay him off. So
Oh,
it's
man.
like he didn't have access to the equipment anymore. But that was the same time, I want to say, that must have been after I went to Israel. So I was hoping to get a model out of him before I went to Israel, so I could help show that off. That was again 2016, summer of 2016. I went to Israel. So I was hoping to get that out of him, and then in the fall, you recall doing a thing on the Breaking Israel News, with Eliyahu Berkowitz,
Yeah.
which is now Israel 365 News. We did another thing a few weeks ago, but what was I going to say there? So you covered that article, and after that, there was another guy who contacted me. He's his first name is Brian. Is a civil engineer out of Michigan, and he called me up and he said, hey, do you have any drawings of this thing, to build these? He's like, well, 'cause I'm interested in building a model. I'm like, well, funny you should ask that, because I have these things that I generated, for this other guy, and that's not going anywhere anymore. But so we got to talking, had good rapport and everything, and so he helped fund the basically a frame, when I say a frame building, frame design, that we made, which is a nominal 1/8 scale model, and so that I spent basically a bunch of the winter and into the spring and summer a bit between fabrication and erection of the frame. It was really kind of a proof of concept, because I couldn't find any engineer who had the interest and or the aptitude. All this stuff that I did at the engineering on this. This is all stuff we learn in school. Like every engineer learns most all of this stuff that I'm doing, with some exception. And so I was hoping I would find enough engineering people who said, hey man, let me get involved here, and so again, Brian was and there's other things where people practice within their expertise, and after they go to school, they just say, all right, I'm not doing any more of that again. So there's a little bit of mixture of interest and aptitude, but what I have here is these are all fairly basic basic as far as calculations, equations, all that stuff. It's basic engineering stuff in order to qualify this, seeing how much material's there, seeing what the stress is, what the load is. It's all pretty cut and dried. Between a sophomore and a junior and engineer, you could a curriculum, you could probably qualify most of it, but it still takes a lot of time. And it's like, well, show me an engineer who's just really bored, who just wants to spend a lot of time in qualification, and no one showed me one of those. So it's like, well,
yeah, no, you need.
I'll just build it.
Yeah, I think you need a retired engineer somewhere. Somebody that's he's retired, he's sitting around, he's bored, and he needs a project. When my grandfather in his later years, when you're retired and he was a widower, my grandmother died a number of years earlier, and you ended up getting cancer and stuff, and you sit around and watch golf all day, And I came up with this idea because I was doing all these odd jobs, and I got this job driving a train at a fair, and it was basically, well, it wasn't basically, it was somebody took a riding lawnmower and built a frame around it to look like a train, and had little carts behind it. You could tow about 6-8 kids or whatever in these carts, and I thought, man, that's pretty cool, but I could improve on that. And my grandpa was a golfer, so I used to love riding the golf carts. I thought a golf cart would make a much better, much bigger, much cooler train. So I went out and bought a golf cart, and I told my grandpa, I said, hey, Gramps, I want to turn this golf cart into a train. And he's like, oh, that's an interesting idea. So I start tinkering in the garage and stuff, and he'd peek in every now and then, next thing I know, every time I left, I'd come back and he'd have another half of the train built, because he was like retired and bored and just wanted to do something, and he built this beautiful train for me. So you need a grandpa like that's an engineer. Anybody out there listening, if you're listening, you're an architect or you're an engineer, and you want a project, get a hold of Andy. And in a minute, we'll have Andy give your contact information for people to do that. But I had a question before you do that, and that is, didn't Moses erect the thing by himself? And if he did, how did that work?
I don't see that as being the case as far as the amount of loads. So unless we're talking miraculous forces with parting the Red Sea and raising the staff and so forth, I think the fact, and it's credited to Moses because he's in charge. I think it's that simple. And to credit Moses as doing it solo is, I actually have calculations. I got 20 pages of, where I've got 80 different, drawing slides total in that whole collection of things, showing each step of the lift of what they have to do, where one guy has to be. And I would like to turn that into some video, animated, video to show this whole erection process by, part by part. So I've got it all calculated, figured out, if you've got, 50 guys pulling on a rope in this direction, and, times 10, what have you, it's like, how many people did the tabernacle take to erect? Well, you got 22,000 Levites. So you got plenty of manpower. It's just a matter of allocating them and coordinating and say, well, where does who need to go when? And when you say 1, 2, 3, this was serious business lifting this thing up. If you take a look at, the book of Numbers, the Levites are clearly responsible, but anyone who came near it when they were doing the lift work was to be put to death. And the reason why, it's like you can't have people screwing around, dropping frogs and mice around and hoping that somebody, jumps out of surprise. And, this is like a no room for error, no surprises type thing. Otherwise, you have collapse, during some of these interim conditions. This loading. You're moving tons and tons of wood with, ropes that are somewhat elastic, and the wood itself has got some bend to it. So, if you ever try, bouncing something on a rope or something like that, you start to a rope that could normally pick something up slowly. Now if you drop something so it's falling, it's called a dynamic load, and that would just basically snap the ropes type thing. So you have all these different things to consider that are, again, it's serious stuff. And that's why, as far as doing it, but getting in this procedure, that was part of the feasibility. And that's really why, making the 8th scale model is because I couldn't find, someone who is highly qualified to, to do this. And as far as the engineering side, and then it's also proof of concept. It's a learning opportunity. It's like, well, when's the last time you built a tabernacle? Well, I never have. And so what experience do I have? Some of these woodworking things, there's possible steam bending involved. And, I wasn't doing steam bending, but I was doing a lot of CNC machining in order to do it, to get precision. Again, we're looking at scale and order of magnitude there. So, it has to be a pretty balanced structure as far as the exactness of it. And so basically summer of 2017, I had that all, I had that erected. I had it, the frame standing. I just didn't have it dressed.
So how big is, just for the sake of, myself as well as my audience, put this into real numbers for us. How big is 1/8 scale? Like, what's the diameter of the circumference of this thing? How big is a 1/8 scale?
Yeah, the 1/8 scale measures out, assuming again a 25-inch cubit, that measures out at 26.5 feet, as I recall.
Okay, 26. That's the diameter.
Diameter, yes.
I thought a cubit was, I guess it depends, right? On
there's a common cubit, there's a sacred cubit, there's a royal cubit, so they're all different, but and interrelated too.
So I thought it was like, I guess depending on which one you're talking about, between 18 and 20.
18 and 21.
21.
Yeah.
So you're going on the larger side, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's the most conservative as far as from a feasibility standpoint. It's also the most majestic, and I think it's the most probable. You're familiar with David Flynn, as I recall, yes?
Oh yeah, David Flynn, yeah.
Yeah. So in his
genius.
book, what's that?
The guy was a genius.
Oh yeah, yeah. in the temple of at the temple of the center of time, I'm assuming you have that, or you've read that book.
I have not read it. I've skimmed it. I've used it as a resource. I have it over here. I've got his whole collection actually. Tom Horn put it out as a volume there.
Oh yeah.
Somebody mentioned that they had all that oxen to help also.
They did. I really don't think that they used them for a variety of reasons. You start looking at the people density and things like that, and it just doesn't lend itself very much to animals that are fairly unpredictable as far as when you're erecting this has got to be a very
precise.
It's precise. It's what I would refer to as like a fixed displacement. So you can't control how many pounds a person is pulling on a rope, because the guy in front of you is strong and zealous, and he's pulling 75 pounds. In the meantime, you got some guy standing behind you who's the runt of the litter and has chapped hands, or whatever. So he's putting in his 20 pounds of pull. So you would be balancing the manpower, because these are guys who are between the ages of 20 and 50, who are doing all this labor lifting type thing. But they would go fixed displacement, so they would go 1 foot at a time. So it would be like step. It would have to be very controlled in distances, where they would mark off the distance that they have to accomplish each motion, because it's very, very much in harmony. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were starting to say something about David Flynn.
Oh yeah, the Temple of the Center Time. David Flynn brings up a guy named John? Was it John
D? Yeah, the mathematician.
Yeah, he sounds kind of like a crazy guy, but this is where Flynn was kind of making arguments about the cubit, and the numbering of the Bible, of course, is not recognized by most as inspired writ. However, there's some really interesting corollaries when you start to look at, like Daniel 12:6 and Revelation 12:6, and there's 1260 days, there's times and a half a time. It's just weird stuff like that, right? That appears every now and again. He brought up the idea that the Ark of the Covenant was measured 25:20, and the word ark is really orech is having to do with the idea of a length of measure or time or an arch. So we get archery, archaeologists, all these things from the word orech, and so the idea they even call it an Ark of the Covenant, it's not an ark, because an ark is not that comes from that Hebrew thing for length measuring, basically. Or time measuring, it could be used in the capacity of time. If you have something arching through the sky, it's orech. It's the idea of length. And I'm bringing this up because Exodus 25:20, you have the Ark of the Covenant, the length of the covenant. This idea that the Aron is in Hebrew. What was I going to say about that? So 25 verse 20, corresponding with 25.2. The ancients actually used inches, and the cubit systems that they used, according to D, and there's some other sources I've seen on that. I think John Mitchell has got some good stuff on that, showing how the common cubit is the smallest at 18 point something or 18.0, and then you go up to like a 21.6 arguably, and a 25:20, which numerically is it's like saying 360 times 7. So if you think 360 times 7, that's 2,520. So if you change the decimal point on that, now you're at 25.2, and so that's again you've got the common, the royal, and the sacred. I think the sacred is the middle size, and the royal is the biggest. But so I use that because it's the most conservative, and again it makes the most. Because if there's only the materials are such and such, if you only have this much metal, that's the metal is issued by weight, not by length, whereas all the wood is issued by length. And so if you can build the big structure with still the least amount of metal, or with the same amount of metal, it really stands the test of time, and it beats all things. So that's why I use that. But
okay. Well, we got about 2.5 minutes before we go to our final break, and so I'm going to let you just roll with the last segment of the broadcast. Take it wherever you want to go. Make sure you cover everything you want to cover. But you mentioned eschatology earlier, and everybody's concerned about the building of the third temple, and from a Christian perspective, many people, that's taboo because we think of Antichrist and that kind of stuff. But I'm thinking about that because that's based on the abomination of desolation, standing in the holy place, so you automatically assume holy place, temple. But I'm looking at that going, well, that's an admitted assumption. What if it's a tabernacle? And if it is a tabernacle, are you in danger of being the one that creates it? Are these the kind of things that you have to keep you awake at night, or what? Andy's responsible for the abomination of desolation. That could stink.
Don't give him any ideas, Rob,
right.
Please.
I know. Well, I mean, these are things that would keep me awake at night.
It's a funny comment, but in the book of Ezekiel, actually, it talks about it does mention Mishkan again, and this is when Israel and Judah are reunited in the land. So that is one of the points. Also this idea of this being the mountain of the Lord. So you can see behind me here.
Yeah.
This is a mound. Okay. Moses is told, you make sure you make everything according to the patterns shown in the mound. So is this a hint towards, wherever we read the word mountain of the Lord? Derek Gilbert mentioned that, from who's kind of with the Skywatch crew and everything.
Yeah.
It's like wherever we see the word mountain of the Lord, should we be thinking of this? And I'm very partial to that. Is when they're saying, let's go up to the mountain of the Lord, well, does it have to be all earthen? Where is it in our language? According to our language, an earth is a mountain. We have the word mound, like mound, and then mount. A mount we think of as something with a peak, and a mound is something more like a hump of a hill. But in Hebrew, you have har. And this is where we get Armageddon, Har Megiddo. Har Sinai is Mount Sinai. Horeb, Mount Horeb.
All right, hold that thought.
From the dawn of man, we have turned to nature to help attain balance within ourselves. But somewhere, we lost our way. Western culture is once again remembering the healing benefits of CBD, the non-psychoactive component of the hemp plant. That's why more and more people who use CBD report relief from inflammation and chronic pain, balanced blood sugar and cardiovascular system, relief from muscle tensions, tremors, migraines, headaches, anxiety, depression, and the list goes on. The big question is, where do you get it? Life is a 99% pure CBD oil made with all organic ingredients, and it's available to TFR listeners worldwide. If you use coupon code TFR at checkout, you'll get $5 towards your order. Head on over to ialife.com now. That's AYA life.com.
This is iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio.
iHeartRadio makes you want to move. When you have a great melody, a song will last forever.
Instantly connected.
I love it when the beat goes.
Did you know you can listen to Truth Frequency Radio on iHeartRadio? Just download the app to your smart car, smartphone, or smart TV and get the best of TFR wherever you are.
iHeartRadio.
I'll see you there.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7, with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
For millennia, mankind has been searching for answers to the big questions, such as, where did the universe come from? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Are we alone? And just what the heck is the Sasquatch all about? I can't promise you answers, and neither can the Woo Crew, but they invite you to join them Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern, midnight in the UK, for Freaky Friday, exclusively on Truth Frequency Radio. Spirituality, multiverse, quantum mechanics, the occult, and so much conspiracy analysis that it will make your mind melt. Take my word for it. Freaky Friday. It's more than a show. It's a way of life. I am Stephen Hawking, and I am proud to be a Wookiee.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
No hate, no hype, no fear. Real people, real radio.
And we're back on the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba, and we are in the final half-hour segment of the broadcast, talking with my guest, Andy Hoy. And Andy, right before the break, you were talking about mound versus mountain. Interesting thought right there. Somebody suggested in the chat room that maybe you could contact some engineering schools and architect schools and see if they are looking for a project. And that might be an idea too, is get a whole school on it for you. But anyway, just wanted to give you the last half hour of the show and let you go wherever you wanted to go with it. I want to make sure that people you get everything out that you want to get out. And if people want to contact you, how can they get a hold of you?
Easiest way for contact, project314.org is my website. You start there. There's a contact us form, a little envelope and a telephone, kind of up in the header. You click on that, and boom, that'll go shunt directly to me. And that's also how you register for the up-and-coming conference, which is the first model exhibition. To that, the other viewers' comment, I would like to flip that and say, why don't you contact them? I've gone on a lot of how would I say deer paths and rabbit trails, and when people recommend, oh yeah, you should talk to my pastor about this, you should talk to this person, I've done that. I've done my share of it. I'm sick of it. It yields little, and if you can do that and you want to do that, I'm all for it. I think this would be a great thing. I wanted to come up with basically a STEM line of like homeschool content and everything like that. And I was kind of looking at that before, COVID hit. And I guess I'm just saying with this whole thing, there's lots of people who are giving ideas. I need people to go, go ye therefore, for you guys to be doing outreach, starting into some capacities of it, because I just can't do it all. There's just not enough time in a day. There's all sorts of delicious research that I would rather do, and not only that, but I having a lot of responsibility with some of the modeling and some of the other projects here, and I actually tried doing that in Tel Aviv, between Tel Aviv and also went to Haifa University, while I was in Israel to try to engage staff there. So it's like, well, if I can't get them to pick that up and run with it, then where am I? So So I guess I'd like to just kind of go back to my modeling thing. So I kind of suspended the modeling effort after I did a proof of concept of the frame and the lift, kind of proving beyond a reasonable doubt, A, that this frame can go together like I envisioned, and B, that it stands up, and C, that they can erect it. That's the essence of the feasibility. And I haven't done outdoor testing, and so I never made a covering for that. And so it went straight into storage from there, just about. And it was kind of a shame to put it away at the time, but recently that's been resurrected again. I'll get to that in a bit. But getting into this other side of modeling, so the same engineer who sponsored the build, the first, the frame, the first 8th scale frame build, also basically said, you need to get this stuff out there. You need to go to some sort of conferences, etc. I said, well, I'm game. If there's someone who will, in a sense, have me. Most of the conferences are, of course, by invite only, and I'm just. It's not like I'm a company that has just some grand crazy budget. I'm doing this full time and in the basement and without a lot of public attention, might I add, in general. So we have. I went to. He basically said, go to a show of your choice. And so they had one called ASOR, which is the American Society of Oriental Research. They had a whole bunch of people, archaeologists, et cetera, there. So I figured, it ties into academia. This hopefully would resonate with them. Now, going there, I wouldn't say it was a total waste of time. Made a few contacts here and there, but no forward motion on the project. But what I did for it, I did do a lot of graphics development. And again, this is where, if you read the House of El Shaddai, I developed all the CGI, like the stuff that's shown behind me here. That's what I was developing for the ASOR show, so you could see on the monitor how this thing here converted to this thing here. All the parts swapped over, and the video is kind of ugly, so I've never finalized and released it, but it made okay stills. So 2017. Into 2018, I was basically, I'd gone between the ASOR, well, that was end of 2017, and in 2018, I got into the books, between writing, getting that edited, published and everything. So I did one, the House of El Shaddai. Then I decided, well, I would really rather write one, dealing with all the Hebrew, but I figured that it's a smaller market, and between Hebrew roots and that being kind of the core possibility, I didn't see that as being a really viable market. So that's why I released the House of El Shaddai first. So this other one is got a lot of Hebrew interlinear content in it, to help people so that they can see, this Hebrew is not such a big, bad, ugly thing, and it's something we can navigate and manage. So that's a book that I really wanted to write, and that's right now in the process of being edited. Getting into the 3D model, I did buy that printer and was trying to print out parts, but from a feasibility standpoint, I just couldn't make, I don't think, a feasible model. But since then, I've had a couple developments there, and I guess before getting into that, the small physical, let me go into the let's see, the physical. The virtual, realizing that a lot of this war is to be won in the mind's eye and in imagery. Here is, let's see, I'll make that bigger here. Now I'm standing in the way of it. There we go, little me. So this is something recently put together by Ward, a guy out in Arizona, who's he just got this to me a few days ago. We're taking the original model that I had, and we're trying to work it into a lot of different landscapes and places. He's pretty tech savvy with an Apple computer on steroids, and he's getting into the ins and outs of Blender. So the plan and the hope and the dream is we can put this tabernacle every single place that it's listed in the Bible. I would like to do stuff like virtual reality, get people with the glasses and really, be able to experience, Torah a lot more firsthand. So this is just one of the shots he has it there. Let me see if I can bring up another. Here we go.
And just for the sake of the radio audience, describe whatever you are going to put up on the screen.
Yeah, so this is basically, just the dome being,
at ground level.
in different settings, different environments. So you can see here this person's scale a little bit small yet, but typically a person would go up to about the purple on the gate here. So if the person is the gates, I figure about 8 feet tall, and so a 6 foot person is going to come up, just short of 2/3 of that, but 3/4 of it actually. It's and so depending upon how tall the people are too, I guess, of course. But so anyway, he's presenting this in all these different places, and so there's things that could be done with as far as storyboarding, and again, a lot of this is just living right out of the Torah, and so with Google Earth, this makes it a real interesting reality. Let me see if I can bring up one more here.
That's a lot of fabric to cover a 6 foot or 6-story high dome tent.
That's a lot of. So yeah, this is showing kind of what it would look like on the landscape, possibly. And again, this is, as I understand, a Google Earth-based landscape. And as far as all the elevation, topography, so you get into feasibility analysis and everything. And if anything's to be found archaeologically, it's like, could they find round clearings where they put a round thing? I've talked to the Caldwells a little bit about their time at what do you call it, at Jabal al-Lawz, the Sinai location. He said there was a lot of round things, around there as far as evidence of structures and things like that, or what have you. And there's a bunch of round pillars. So do they use pillars to jack this up in part? Possibly. That's So I guess there's a lot of different things, but. So Ward is working a little bit with me on some of the CGI stuff, and so ideally we can turn this into, some sort of live video. That's a lot of computer, crunching power and time and everything. But we would like to have other people, on the team as well, working in that capacity. So if you're someone who's savvy in these graphic arts, give us a call and like to get you in touch with Ward possibly and see, there's a lot of different things that can be done, beyond the imagination here. So, and this is another reason I'd like to do more of this video stuff, because, video is far more reachable than books are and things like this. Another model, and I'm not going to show this one, but back in November, I had, Mark from Idaho contact me. He had done he had made he made a kind of a zodiac layout that I saw on YouTube, or I'm sorry, on Facebook. I saw it circulating one day, and he posted it, and I was like, hey, are you interested in a project possibly? And so was talking to him a little bit about what his CNC capabilities were, and so we can cut out little parts of, we're looking to make a desktop model, about 25 inches, and then the next one up being 50 inches, and the next one up maybe being 100 inches. So we're talking, again, desktop to tabletop to playroom, something where, people can experience the Torah, much more hands-on. So he has made just a beautiful frame off of, concept that I dreamt up at the makerspace but never implemented on, because I don't have infinite time to fab everything and resources. So he's been really instrumental in getting this frame along pretty far. So hoping, within another, quarter or two that we have a product available, up for sale. And let's see, we have, besides that, I guess, the most recent model, I had a guy named Tony contact me out of Illinois, back in November, almost the same time that I was in contact first with Mark. And I don't know, maybe did Mark contact me or did I contact him? I forget. But his Tony was really interested in building. Actually, he was interested in procuring a model, and I said, well, I don't have any model. And I had left drawings down in Illinois back in 2015, and he's kind of working as a janitor help at this facility, and he saw this set of drawings, and he's like, wow, this is he's on to something. So, Tony's experience in erecting silos and things like that. So, grain bins, big round structures, and it's like, this is the guy I need to talk to. So, so we struck up a good rapport pretty quick, and he said, well, let's he expressed interest in wanting to set this thing up. I said, well, it's the frame only. The Emperor has no clothes in this case, and so right now, as we speak, he and his son are putting finishing touches on the clothing for our Tabernacle model, and I'll show that in a second here.
Well, speaking of that, though, when I'm looking at the scale of the model as well as the person there, and assuming that's leather or some kind of fabric, how did they even carry that around? I mean, that must have had to been put up in sections, because
yes, I believe so. And they would have served like a structural purpose as well, but altogether, I think it was like 1,500 to 2,000 animals you need skins from in order to make a roof that big.
Well, they certainly sacrificed that many when you look at reading through the book of Numbers. One young bull, or Leviticus. One young bull. You're like, oh, what are they doing with all that skin?
Yep.
So they would certainly have it, but carrying it, I mean, leather's heavy,
It is, but it isn't. When you start doing the actual math, it's probably a few thousand pounds of leather. I guess I would have to go back and look at it again. But they had wagons for carrying some things, and if you look at, they wouldn't have put the wood on the wagons because there's not enough oxen and stuff to pull the wood at the weight that they're that they're specking out here. So the wood, I think, was on its own set of wheels, but the leather and stuff was probably pulled in one of several carts that were donated by some key families that's described in the Torah there. So, so yeah, let me go back to screen share here.
Yep, you had 10 minutes, by the way.
Yep.
Just
so this here, what you see behind me, is just kind of the beginning of some of my ring stuff. This is cutting out some of the rings on the floor, etc.
Cool.
Stacking them together. I didn't steam bend anything, so I had to do a lot of just machining instead. There's just a heap of wood chips that I left behind. These are just some of the features of let's see, the some of the beams used in the frame. Here's kind of the initial layout of the courtyard. This model right now, the 8th scale, it's installed on a platform. This platform is, between 35 and 40 feet. So it's a pretty big thing. So this is on location right now, kind of where this is from a little while back when I was down there. So they're again putting finishing touches. So these photos are now dated in project time. So we've been getting everything together. So the roof and all the other we got Tony and Marty. Thank you, Tony and Marty. And so as far as just kind of getting it lit up, so I think the thing would have been lit up, kind of looked like a lampshade in the wilderness landscape. But this is available to see for free this coming Sunday in Sterling, Illinois. I'm doing 2 presentations there from noon to 5, and we have it so it's day mode and night mode, and there's a lot to the construction. This is just me fabbing some of the metal parts, I guess, some time ago. But some machine details.
So are you feeling a bit of a kindred spirit with Bezalel and Oholiab, the guys who had to do this?
I found Oholiab with me now, so so I said you're Oholiab and I'm Bezalel maybe. So it's Oholiab was much better at fabricating. There's just more things that he's credited for. By the way, you find the description of Bezalel in Exodus 31 verse 4 around, it's kind of centered around 31:4. Get it? 3:14.
Nice.
The Holy of Holies in the book of Chronicles, I think it's 2 Chronicles 3, in the temple is actually described. It's chapter 3, verse 14. Very interesting. The words Ahie, Asher Ahie, Exodus 3:14, which is, I am existing that I am existing, or I am that I am, as some people put it. But so there's a lot of the reference to eternity in 3:14 is not missed in the Bible. And the word Shaddai, Hebrew word Shaddai, Shin Dalet Yud, the Shin is worth 300, the Dalet is worth 4, and the Yud is worth 10. So you sum all that together. So El Shaddai is literally the God of pi. So I guess that's the when I say the nickel dime, that's the super crash collision tour. But I'll be doing that presentation on the body this coming Sunday, and I'll be doing the just kind of an introduction and being able to show this, in real life, real time, pointing at things. This is a game changer from that standpoint. This is something now. Now that this is built for real, it's like, let me see what you guys got. I wouldn't even say that, because I know what they got. I've seen it. I've been to Israel. Between Shiloh and Timnah, and then there's another one in Ariel. As far as the models in Ariel and Timnah, Shiloh has this platform which some people think is like, well, this is kind of a rectangular platform, so therefore the tabernacle was here. It's like, well, it's not super rectangular, and they find holes in the ground, drilled, carved into the stone. So it's like, they're like holes like what you'd expect on a 4x4 post or post hole. So it's like, you're saying these are tabernacle post holes, because the tabernacle post holes, there wasn't that much material given. That's wood. Or they assume it's wood, even though there's no wood mentioned in Exodus 27. And they're copper, so there would have been a very small diameter post, and it's like, so they're basically, they find this pile of bedrock and heap, and it's like, oh, now we're scholars and we know that this is where they did the tabernacle, and they think that this slab of bedrock is proof positive the tabernacle was rectangular. And there's some Torah teachers who advocated that, and it's preposterous. It's just a joke. It's so laughable. I shouldn't even mention it anymore. But
well, we got 5 minutes before the end of the show. People can go to your website, is project314.org, and I'm looking at it right now. You've got your products and stuff there, and all your contact information is there and everything like that. So you're doing it this Sunday. That's on there.
Yes.
Also the event. You can register to go to the event. So if you want to plug that or anything else you'd like, you got about 5 minutes before we are wrapping up here.
Yep. So the event, again, is free, and with it being free, it is registration required. I'm telling you it's in Sterling, Illinois, but I'm not giving the actual location of the facility because I don't want to have people crash there unannounced, etc. So registration is easy. Just go to the website, the homepage. You'll find the link right away to click into the description of the event, and then from there also the registration. So registration, we're asking everyone to register by Friday. So that's short notice. I was really hoping we could do the show a week or two ago. I know you've been swamped with seed and everything like that, but
yeah,
and I've been pretty crazy swamped myself on this here. So but I appreciate your last minute hospitality on this whole thing too, because it's I don't have the reach on social media, a fraction what you got, and it's nice to network this way together, and I know with a lot of your people, you have a lot of people there that are very they're very return to Torah advocates. You've got this idea that well, let's keep the feast. We're keeping the feast. This thing here it's called the Ohel Moed, right? And it's basically the tent of appointment, or tent of seasons, or tent of feasts. So everyone's bragging all the time about, oh, I read Leviticus 23. I'm keeping the feast. I'm keeping the feast. Well, what about Exodus 26? How do we keep the feast without the tent of feasts? Because it's kind of like crawl, walk, run. So it's great. Everyone's going back to the days. What are the days? I've got an article on my website called the Tent of Appointed Times, and so getting into this idea that this thing, I believe it was a clock and a calendar as well. I think they used it. They could have used it and to cite their exact latitude and everything like that. So it's amazing as far as what it could well have been used for. But this is mentioned. The Ohel Moed is mentioned more than the Moed or the Moedim themselves. And so I just, again, I'm trying to shift some of this focus and this interest. It's like, I'm trying to survive as a Levite. I'm trying to, do this tabernacle thing, because I think it's one of these things. It's part of the eternal set of commandments, and it says, do this thing, and there's so much, revelation and I think blessing that comes from this, in as far as understanding and everything. So, I'm hoping people are interested in getting on board, more than just saying, great job, I'll be praying for you. There's a old adage in the boaters community. It says, my boat runs on gas, not thanks. So it's nice that people are thankful what I'm doing, but if people don't put their money where their mouth is, Rob, this is we go nowhere. And I think we're in a lot of ways the laughing stock as far as restoring the name. You want to talk about restoring the name and the place? This thing here, this shoebox thing, is laughable. It's embarrassing, and this is reason enough alone to say, hey, let's rebuild this structure. They spent $50 million on a boat that won't float, or $100 million on a boat that won't float for a flood that won't happen. It answers in Genesis with the Ark exhibit, which is nice. I'm not trying to take away from that, but I'm saying this is his house. There's more description of how to build this than any other structure in Scripture. All your churches and everything people are building, this is what he said to build. He never said build a church, etc. So that's my appeal to your audience, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
You are out there building this thing, and I kind of joked about it earlier, but you are serving as the function of Betzalel right now. With your Oholiab, volunteers or people you can get. But the other side of that story was the people contributed so much to that work that they actually had to stop working, tell Moses, look, dude, tell them to stop giving. Like, when has that ever happened in ministry before? That's all of our prayers. Those of us who are in ministry are trying to do something big, is like, look, we can't do it without you guys. We're doing the work, but we need the funds, we need the resources, we need the help. So this is an appeal to help Andy with this, and you can go to Project 314 to check out his website and reach out to him, and maybe you guys can get together and make this thing happen. Hey Andy, it's been great having you on again. I'm so excited to see your models, and I'll reach out to Chris and Liz Bailey and see about maybe getting you at the Take on the World conference. But good to have you here again, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Rob. It means a lot to me.
Okay, right on. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Revolutionary Radio Project. We will see you back next week at 11 p.m. Central Standard Time, and I'll be on Zen Garcia's show tomorrow for our Genesis study. Good night, everybody.